Hello students, you're welcome to today's lesson, and today we're going to talk about indirect rule system. Remember, our previous lesson was about colonialism, and colonialism is the imposition of a more developed culture over a less developed one. I believe the last lesson was very exciting to you. The objectives for this lesson are: you should be able to know the meaning of indirect rule system. You should be able to know the features of indirect rule system. You should be able to know the reasons for the adoption of indirect rule system. And finally, you should be able to know the roles played by traditional rulers during the British colonial administration. Now, in this lesson, you are going to learn about the struggle against foreign domination. And you're also going to learn about those nationalists that fought against foreign domination. Ensure you have your writing materials close to you. The next thing you're going to see is the slides for this lesson. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll be right back.
Hello students, welcome to today's lesson, and today we are going to talk about indirect rule system. I repeat, indirect rule system. Now, what is indirect rule system? Indirect rule is a system of administration in which the British colonial government adopted as its colonial policy in dealing with the people by using the traditional rulers, the traditional political institutions, administrative, cultural, and judicial structures as intermediaries, while the British officials mainly advised and, when necessary, enforced colonial regulations. Alright students, please make sure you have your writing materials close to you. Now, when we say indirect rule system, from the word indirect rule system, now it is this British system of administration that made use of our local traditional rulers in the administrative process. Hello? They made use of our local traditional rulers in the administrative process for so many reasons. I will discuss that in the course of this lesson. Remember, our last lesson was about colonial administration. And I said the British came to Africa for so many reasons, which are economic reason, slavery reason, civilization reason, and religious reason. Now, they came to Africa to explore our resources, and at the end we get peanuts in return for it. Okay. Now, in the system, the British system, they embraced our cultural heritage. They did not disregarded it. So they used our own local traditional people in the administration. Okay. Now let us see the main features of indirect rule. The first is traditional rulers. Now, the colonialists rule indirectly by engaging the traditional rulers and the chiefs to govern the people. They made use of our traditional rulers in the administrative process. Hello? Now, the second feature is that the traditional system of governments was utilized. The system of government was utilized. The third feature is that customs and traditions of the people were preserved. The customs and traditions of the people played a significant role in the administration. It was not ignored. The next feature is respect for the culture. Respect for the culture. The cultural values of the people were respected by the British officials. The cultural values were not disregarded. It was not disregarded. They respected it. Now, the next feature is British officials. They were to guide and They were to guide and, when need be, enforce colonial regulation. For instance, residents and district officers. Now, the few British personnel were meant to guide and enforce colonial regulation in certain areas. Alright, now the next feature is respect for the traditional rulers. Respect for the traditional rulers. They were respected and given exalted positions in the administration, which made it easy for the colonialists to operate and rule. We can see that the traditional rulers were given what? A place to serve. They were respected in this system. The next feature is cost of administration. The cost of administration was not high because those involved were paid peanuts. Because there were few British personnel and they made use of our local traditional leaders, so they were not paid so much. It wasn't expensive. They were given what? Peanuts in return. Now the next feature is collection of taxes. The white made use of natural agricultural produce. The white men made use of natural agricultural produce. Now they were collecting taxes from what? Our our natural agricultural produce. Now the next feature is native courts. There's what we call native courts. Back then, native courts were used for administration of justice. Now we have some Supreme Court and the rest of them, but back then it was called native court, and the native courts were used by the British to administer justice. Now the next feature is the police and prisons. They had native police and prisons were utilized in the system where offenders are punished. Alright, are we together, students? Now let us see the reasons for the adoption of the system of indirect rule. Now the first reason is lack of British personnel. The system had few Europeans to control effectively areas under their control. I repeat, the system had few Europeans to control effectively areas under their control. What it means is that the British they had what? Few personnel for administrative purposes. That was the reason why they had to use what? Traditional rulers to replace what? The British personnel they don't have. The next reason for the adoption of the system of indirect rule is insufficient fund. There was no sufficient fund from the British government to engage British officials for direct administration. Back then, there were not enough funds to support the system of indirect rule. The next reason is poor climate. Poor climatic condition also aggravated the situation. Many British citizens refused coming down to be involved in the administration due to poor climate and the presence of mosquitoes. Africa was nicknamed the white man's grave as a result of these factors. Can we say that even up to now we have mosquito what's it called? Even up to now, we still have mosquito. Even up till now, we still suffer from mosquito bites. We still suffer from mosquito bites and harsh climatic condition. The next reason is to satisfy the economic needs. Like I said before, the colonialists came to explore our various natural resources for economic exploitation. The colonialists wanted to create markets for their goods and to encourage West Africans to produce those raw materials. The next reason is the role and position of traditional rulers. Britain saw their uniqueness, the role and positions occupied in the administration before the introduction of indirect rule. The people saw these rulers as of divine and should be respected. For example, the emirs. Therefore, not using them might mean chaos and instability in the system. Yes, because we have our own traditional rulers back then, so they have to acknowledge them. They have to what? Use them in the process of administration. Are we together, class? The next reason in this system is language barrier. Indirect rule succeeded in removing the language barrier that would have posed a problem to the British colonial administration if direct rule was adopted. English language used by the Britain was quite different from the languages of most of our colonies, for example, Nigeria. Remember, in Nigeria we have what? We have so many ethnic groups. Now this would have been a problem to the British people or British government back then, because as at then people don't understand English. What they understand is their own native language. They do not understand English. So language barrier is another reason for adopting indirect rule system. And we also have the system being a very cheap one. The system was very cheap. Now the indirect rule is not expensive to operate. The cost of administration was very cheap, and this was because little amount was paid to the traditional rulers used for the system. They were given peanuts. They were given little amount. Hello, the amount is not what they're supposed to take. It doesn't want it, but because why? They don't know the value, so they were given what? Peanuts in return for their job done for the British government. Students, I hope you have written down those points. Now let us see the roles played by the traditional rulers during the British colonial rule in Nigeria. Now the first rule is that they took part in the colonial government policy of indirect rule. Our traditional rulers took part in the colonial government policy of indirect rule. They were given some positions then. The second role is that they assisted in the maintenance of law and order. They were involved in maintaining law and order during colonial administration. The next role played by the traditional ruler is the preservation of culture and customs. Culture and customs of the people were not disregarded. It was preserved. It was really preserved by the traditional rulers. The next role is that they acted as a link between the colonial masters and their people. Yes, they were able to communicate with the colonial masters and their people. They were like this bridge, should I say middlemen. You know, they have language, what's it called? This language of a thing could have been a barrier, but because they were able to communicate effectively, they were able to communicate with the British people and with their own people as well. Now the next role played by the traditional ruler is lawmaking. Yes, they played lawmaking function during the British colonial system of indirect rule. And lastly, they were involved in the settlement of disputes. They were involved in settling what? Issues between different people, between different parties as at that time. Alright. I believe you must have written down those points, and I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Alright. You can see that indirect rule was a system by the British people to to rule the traditional people using traditional rulers to make the system very, very effective. The reason is the involvement of the traditional rulers made the system very, very convenient, effective, and less expensive to operate. I hope you understand now. See you in our next lesson.
Alright, welcome back. I believe you enjoyed the lesson, and by now you should be able to understand that indirect rule is a British system that made use of our traditional rulers in the administrative structure. Alright, see you in our next lesson. Bye.